All right, perfect. So this is gonna be way less technical looking and more pretty images than stuff. So um, the main focus of this one is like designing keyboards and customizing overall and trying to use that. So let's start with the first thing. Oh, sorry. This is the Chicago LinkedIn group. If you guys don't follow it, you should. Trying to not only increase for current users, but also so new users can see it more. Because we have a really good turnaround for returning users, but we're trying to grow the US as well. Just like, and also as for Chicago merch, we have t-shirts, other stuff, or if you guys have any mind, go do it. Or you can take a chance for it and get out later. So let's get started.
Use the mic. It's hard to hear you.
Oh, yeah. Can you hear me better?
Yeah.
So let's get this started. So we're going to talk about keywords, and the main question that a lot of people probably in this room have already questioned is the issue of QWERTY, kind of why QWERTY is the way it is. A lot of people just blindly take it as is and use it. It's tied to the actual typewriter, and that's the reason why QWERTY is the way it is. It was developed by Carlos Lighting and Samuel Soul in 1860s, and because of that, we still have the typewriter keyboard pretty much. This is an old model. It's like the first commercial small model. You can see that it kind of looks like a piano, and it's way more mechanical, and I will get jammed super often. This is how it looked. You're like, how on earth are you typing on it? So that's kind of towards where we're heading. Looking into it, the typewriter itself is from the commercial model is late 19th century, and if you look into that one, it's almost exactly as most people's keyboards. And this one is like the first portable. It's actually from 1926, so officially almost 100 years old. And something that it's already like known, but we take it for granted, is that the type machine was already using layers. So we're all familiar with use to, and then you shift, use add. And that's something that we leverage nowadays, and we can make most of it. So again, if you take a closer look, we talk about the shifts and the different characters. We can see that we have the space bar, and it looks almost like identical to what we use nowadays. So now let's take a look at a modern keyboard. Like this is just rounds. I chose a round keyboard. I have all the sources on my slides, which I'll publish. It's a Logitech. I only chose it for the sake that the keys are round and it looks more like an actual typing machine keyboard. But actually, if we compare one to another, they're like 100 years apart, and they're like almost identical. You can probably play like spot differences with this, and that's kind of towards where we're heading. So the modern keyboard, there is multiple layouts. Some people might be already familiar with it. This is a typical full-size keyboard, and the reason for it is that it has a numpad, the nav cluster, the F keys. So how about we start debunking and changing the keyboard as we see it today and see something that could be more optimal for your use case. So again, this is the actual keyboard parts. And it really depends on your work. Probably if you work in finance, you're more focused on trying to keep the numpad all the time because you use it more often than other people. And also you might get used to some function keys if you use certain shortcuts like Alt F4 in Windows to close stuff or navigate around. And same with the navigation cluster. If you're scrolling on a website, a lot of people use page down or control tab and change tabs within the browser. But that doesn't mean that we can like make the same uses. So I would start like removing some of the parts. And in this case, we're going to remove the actual numpad because a lot of keywords people don't even use. Like a lot of people don't even use the numpad. They still use the numbers above the letters over the actual numpad. And on that one, now we have like the 10 keyless keyboard. The only thing that you realize is missing is just the numpad. Everything else is the same. We still have the navigation cluster, the F keys, and a lot of companies you can still use these as like when they give you a keyboard, you most likely this one. Now we can keep going deeper into rearranging. So this is the same amount of keys as the previous one, but the difference is that the navigation cluster and the arrows are a little bit more compact. There's the two versions, the large bezel creates a gap in between the keys and the navigation, so that it's easier for you to kind of just by touch tell which one is which versus the top one. And these are still almost like everything the same except like the numpad. We did remove a couple of the navigation. I think we have 6 and here we have 4. So how do I keep going forward? Now this is a 65. This one does remove a lot of the navigation and actually like, keeps the navigation but removes all the function keys. So if you don't use the function keys, you can easily get around with this one. And I actually was working with at a friend's house like a couple of years ago, and he had this one. At the beginning, it was kind of hard to get into it, but working from home at his place, like after a week, I was already fluent on it, like if for lack of a better word. And this is pretty similar. If we see just removing the arrow keys and the navigation cluster, now we're at 6%. So I'm using a lot of different colors. Like it doesn't really matter. It's more so that it's easy to spot the differences from actual keys to function keys or shift or others. And I have all the keywords and the resources. These are a lot of them shown by companies, but most of these that I'm going to talk about later are open source, and you can make them yourself. On this one, you're missing the arrows, but probably anyone who has played any shooter or any computer game know that you can get around with ASDW as arrows. And it starts to create the layers a bit more in depth. So now you see you have a couple of function keys, and that's kind of where we start to move around. So if we take it even like a bit further, I think this is a little too much. We have 50%. And this one you can clearly tell the different function keys what they do. You can tell that the first row still functions as the function keys, the first row. Then we have like the typical signs and numbers on the home row. And we have again more layers to it, which again we're already used to it, but we don't think about it. Like whenever you use a second command or shift, you're already using them. So it's just more require your brain to use more instead of just using one shift. You're using 2 function keys, and that's kind of how you can get started. So are we going far enough? Like, can we keep going?
Yeah, let's keep going. Keep bringing it further.
So, like, we're not gonna keep removing keys, but let's look into a little thing of the keyword, and it's actually how it's the layout itself. On this one, we can see the top row is like what we're used to it, which is like row staggered, and if we see at the bottom, it's called ortholinear. And this does matter because even though for your right hand, it does make sense this stagger because if you're holding in the home row of the J, you would naturally go slightly tilted towards the right and drag down, and up and down. However, for your left side, for your left hand, if you're holding the actual key on the F, like you should go technically down to V with the index and C with the middle finger, which is completely unnatural to your hand because it would force to tilt it towards the right, the same as towards like the same as the right. So all that is slightly tilted to the right. If you keep it both like natural on the resting position, I kind of do that and cheat at the beginning. I was typing F like C with the index instead of the middle finger. So that was a workaround I need to be a little bit more comfortable with myself. And the reason why ortholinear matters is because your fingers naturally move up and down; they don't move sideways, and that's why it's more natural for it. And this applies not only to the 40%; you can do any keyword to it. The top one is the 40% we just say. The bottom one is I think 60 or 75, and then the bottom one is a full keyboard, and you can see all the navigation cluster at the middle, which kind of forces you to split the keyboard. Which that's actually important because if we look into the keyboard itself, we notice that even in these compact layouts, the wrists are a very like uncomfortable resting position. Instead of being straight and pretty much the end of your hand be aligned, you have to bend it into uncomfortable angles, and even more if they're compact. So you can go with bigger keyboards that have like a gap in the middle or normal full size, but if you actually think about it, whenever your hands are both on the keyboard, they're actually on a pretty compact position. So we can solve that by actually splitting the keyboard so that we can have 2 different halves and you can arrange it however you want. And the benefit of it is that we have it is the same 40 and you can put it anywhere. Naturally, it would be better if we had our shoulder and have like a gap in between. So like right next to your shoulder. And then you can have your coffee, your mouse in the middle, nothing, the cat. And then the benefit of this is that you can also tilt it so that each hand is on a more natural position itself. This one just has like a couple more functions, and Also, it matters because the difference between these two is that even though they're both like straight lines, this one has different lengths. So because your hand doesn't have all the same different lengths for your fingers, I personally have like super short pinky. So although these customized keyboards have a bunch of rows on the left, for me, I'm like I can barely reach that. So like please don't add more into the left. So that's the benefit of those. You can make it fancy. You can add displays to it. This one has a little bit. You can see the stagger is a little bit more aggressive since the Q and W are a little bit different. There's so many open source ones. What I personally did is like I printed a bunch of them and see what really actually fit my hands, and move forward with those. This one even has like encoder so that you can do your screen display, volume, and whatnot, and like as also like displays so that you can have what since you're using layers, it could be helpful so that you can display which layer you're using. Now you can buy them. They're super overpriced if you actually buy these keyboards because they're not meant to be on a big scale, since most people still don't use them. So I would recommend to still find an open source project or buy a kit that has the parts. Either way are really good. If you decide to find an open source one, you can have PCB waste or other computer like to actually print the PCBs for yourself. And the benefit of that is that you can actually create a PCB yourself, not just use an open source one, but even mod it to make it even more personalized. So this is how a PCB actually looks on those. This one has like way more holes than you will usually look, and this is because this is meant for Kale and Choc switches, which pretty much Choc are the very narrow keys, and Kale are the typical mechanical keyboard of most keyboards that people use. That's why you have like very flat keyboards versus very thin ones, in summary. So how it all works. In this case, we're using with like a lot of them using Arduino for micro. So it's doing all the work. And the benefit of it is that whenever you plug into any computer, all your shortcuts and actual layouts and customization would work because it's already operating on its own. So you're just using more of the computer to transfer it, to transfer whatever you're typing. But the good thing of it is like if you, I mean, you don't want to be carrying around too many keyboards, but if you happen to do it and use your friend's computer, everything you configured will be. Um, this is an example. You can just have the Pro Micro. A lot of them is just like the Pi Zero as well. And you can directly, some of them have used like a friend have soldier and they add Mega 32 directly to the circuit. The benefit of these ones is that it can be removable if you have sockets so that you can be changing it around. If something goes wrong, you can replace it. If you don't like it, you can use the same Pro Micro for something else. And yeah, there's like a bunch of like guides online. This is just like Chris Gable's like which has like very detailed for the steps and all the parts. We if we have time we can go over at the end. So at this point, are we finally happy with it? Like is our keyword kind of matching our needs? And I would say like physically yes, but then we enter into another question. Like the actual layout of the keyboard. We talk about the QWERTY and the typewriter, but we can change the layout because going back to the wooden box, one of the issues was that it was very easy for the typewriter to get jammed, and that's why a couple of the characters that were adjacent to each other and next would get stuck. So that's kind of why some of the keys are placed in one way and others. Not necessarily applicable to all of them, but that's why we have like the keys they use a lot, not necessarily next to each other. I think an exception is like A and S. But this is actually the Dvorak layout. This was from a like early 1900, early 20, sorry, like yeah, 1920. He did 1930. Yeah, he did like a lot of research for it and how the home row should be better, which is where your hand rests. And that's kind of why we have the semicolon where usually the Q is, and more A like all AUAE, and where we'll have the ASDF. This is kind of more like some study based on English primarily of how you use the home row on the QWERTY versus the bar. And we can tell that the logic makes sense, but it just never picked up as for people to use because once you're used to something, it's very hard to change it. And that's the reason why, even though the board can have a lot of research for it, it was very hard for the world to move forward. And this is like an example of of how the home row would change if you use the board versus using other like the QWERTY, and you can see that everything would work more and flow more naturally if that's the case. The good thing with it is that the board is like popular, I would say, into you can pretty much find it into any of your current computers. If you go into settings, you can most likely find the board in your phone. Even iPhone has it, so pretty much you can find it anywhere if you can customize that. Now, I would say, regardless, it's still very hard to actually learn to do it yourself, and that's kind of where it takes us to. You can even choose your own layout. Um, you can do it based on um, like English or let's see if I have that open. Yeah, here. So we can configure our own layout, and that's you can look into what you use the most. So I really like the site because there's a bunch of existing ones. One that is very popular nowadays that is not necessarily boring is actually called Comac, and Comac DH is slightly even better because there is a switch on the D of DH here, and you can see the finger usage and stats for it for pretty much all of them. And if you want, you can like, oh, I don't want that in here. You can swatch it and edit it. Um, and that would also apply to this one itself. If you're trying to see the stats of how you're trying to test your own layout, you can change the D to the top and change it to the B or the O instead of dot. And you can still see how it affected. The good thing is that you can customize it to the language. Now that doesn't apply to programming languages, which is something that we're sure. Yeah, so the other thing is that you can flash it. I'll just show the site. So once you have like actually chosen your keyboard and you're comfortable with it, you can go ahead and a couple of different tools. QMK is primarily for wired keyboards when they're split, and CMK is when they're wireless. On the QMK, if you're looking at this one, you can look into most of the open source ones have it. Otherwise, you can change it on the editor yourself. If we're looking at this one, which is like Lily 58, it's a 58 keyboard that is pretty popular. We can have the keyboard here. Imagine we don't like how it is, so we want to change. Um, you can just pretty much drag and drop any key that you want into the keyboard. And speaking to the layers, we already have those. So if you do shift, you get the function keys and characters. You can even have like more than one, where you can have like a full long pad or arrows for it. Like everything you can change for it. The good thing with it is that you can change it actually on C and configure the keys however you want it. Once you get used to what it means, it's pretty straightforward. You don't have this is more like a comment to make it more intuitive at the beginning. So that will be how you would be more happy with your own layout, regardless of the experience. So like that's a lot of customization, and you don't have to do it all or nothing. And so the really tricky part is like, okay, you're happy with layout, like what you have. So now, how do you move forward to trying it? There's a bunch of links and websites that you can learn how to type pretty much from scratch, where you will like try to speed type and improve your typing skills. Some of them do include different layouts where you see the keyboard itself and try to help you tell you which finger they use. Other ones are more like just practice. They don't teach you how to type pretty much, but you would whatever sentence they put online, you will have to type it yourself, and you give it a words per minute or accuracy. So we can do the same with using Python. And let me see if this is already running. And yeah, on that one, there's a couple. There's two primary ways to do it. Like one is with Tinker, and the other one's with Pygame. And by these, you can make it where you use random to generate some random sentences and use that as a tool. Or you can, there's one that I made that you select that Python folder that you use the most, and you bring the most commands or words that you use on that folder to analyze all those, which makes it more applicable. Because if you're typing, some kids' books like random sentences, like how truly helpful is it for your programming at the end of the day? So this one's using Tinker. I did run to GPT to add comments in case I share the code. And then if we run it this one, let me see. So we can add how many words we want to practice. And just so you can see me typing while sharing screen, I just do 4. And we would just type it here. Of course, it doesn't make sense. But then we also get the accuracy, if I were to like intentionally mix it up. That's a crazy percentage, but also, if you're trying to cheat by like slowing down or not typing for some time, you could like max out the time. So, if you're either looking at the keyword for too long or trying to cheat it, it doesn't allow pauses for too long. And that's one of the features. Again, this is more like a UI, like nice looking. You can have it directly built onto interactive that you're running it. This one, you can just create some random sentences so that you don't have to be all of those. You can say like, oh, I want to run 3 sentences. Also, actually, this one created 3 sentences, and it stores it into sentence.file. Here, if you want to see what I created, those are the ones we would randomly use to practice. But again, this is still focusing on actual words. However, if we want to check the words that we use in Python, for example, we want to check the 30 words that I use the most for the folder that I use for this presentation. We can run this one, and I'll create this. Okay, so we created the most used words in this one, and this is primarily focused on Python only. And we can see the self is 241. So if we were to move forward, we can then run it so that the typing is based on actually those words, which you may more helpful for whichever project you're working on. Just for sake of time, it will be the same UI as the other one, but it will show those words. So even though like I already said a lot, you can keep changing stuff. I haven't touched keyboard switches, which all mechanical keyboard fans are crazy about. Not my cup of tea for this case, but I prefer quiet, and that's pretty much my preference. And then same with keycaps, you can go customize it by crazy handmade ones. So are you convinced to like do any of these changes? And if not, the good thing is that you don't have to do it all or nothing. You can, improve the typing speed by those resources with your current existing layout. You can change your keyboard for a more ergonomic one that it doesn't have to follow all these, but the hand scale could be a stick keyboard. There's like a couple made by like Logitech. And also just change the layout, which with every current layout keyboard you have. Now, if you're changing purchase keyboards a bit harder because you don't have the microcontroller to make the changes and reconfiguration as easily. And like this like you can do something like this is the Kinesis, which I used to have like a Logitech version like it, and it's like actually super helpful. I didn't realize until I had it, and that's kind of when I got into it. And I got into it because I did fracture my shoulder, so like moving from the keyboard to the mouse was not viable. So that's kind of why I got into trying to be more efficient with it. And this is actually like Straightman uses one. It's like the Kinesis, which you can see that is like limited, and it makes it in theory more ergonomic, but you can keep going endlessly. Like there is like this open source one that actually a friend from ChiPy made this one, and you can have the trackball, so you don't have to even remove your hand from it. And then you can go crazy. Like there's no limit to this. Like these probably based on the actual how you type it, it will be here and other. So you can keep going. But yeah, sure you have any questions.
What layout do you use?
The layout. So for this one that I brought here, I actually use the Coma DH because I found it more common than some very crazy personalized ones. And if you have any resources I think it's helpful. On this one, I actually brought a split keyboard here, and I did a keyboard QWERTY in case we did any of the light typing. I didn't want to be anything crazy. And this one does have two displays as well, and this one's not wireless. I did forget the TRS cable, which is what connects them. You can either do that, or USB-C, which a lot of new keyboards are doing, which is way more helpful. I'm not sure if you have any questions. Hey, Phil.
Do you have any problems switching from a Spanish keyboard to an English keyboard?
I don't, because actually growing up, most of computers were in English back then. So I grew up forced to do it with basic things like start. And when you use like your first, like even like flip phones were in English most of the time. So I was forced to do it that way. And I'm actually pissed when like someone hands me a phone with that has the Enya character on it because it shifts all the keys a little bit. It's not that much, but just slightly, so that when you're typing without like paying too much close attention, it does mess with it. So I'm actually the opposite, where like I was forced to do it that way, and now it's very hard to go back because, again, I primarily would program in English. So if I'm using Spanish, it's more over the phone, which I still prefer to keep it consistent. I do have the dictionary so that it would correct both, but I personally don't. I only type on QWERTY in the phone, and I also do have the different layout on the split keyboard, but I keep my computer with the same one in case I have to work with my work laptop or someone tells me to help them with something on their laptop. I don't know, like relearning how to type QWERTY like again. So I would definitely recommend if that's the case. Yeah, and so I also lastly there's Chicago mechanical keyboard meetup, which of course I have to show the one that has a flag on it. And on the Discord, there's people that do crazy stuff. Like this is nothing. You're looking more closer to the green keyboard that only has like 18 characters. People doing those, and they also have like the customized caps that people made. And everything like that. So definitely recommend it. Lastly, there is also the Pre Postgres is hosting like a conference end of March. So if you work with query languages, primarily Postgres, definitely for it. And this is the actual group for it, and this would be for the actual event, the PGD Chicago. It's on end of April. But yeah, that's pretty much all I had. So if you have any questions or feedback, shoot me a message.